Make only the videos you're paid to make. Forbid cringe. Cringe is weakness. Weakness is vulnerability. Each and every step of the way, ask yourself, is he actually literally me? This is what it takes. What you must commit yourself to if you want to succeed. Simple.
Downloading new personality. Download complete. New personality engaged.
This year, Netflix, of all places, released a new Literally Me movie. It was met with high praise by some and derision by others, but I will stand by this film. I think that Leo is a masterpiece.
You talk?
Just to you, but you can't tell anyone. They'll try to kill me like E.T.
Adam Sandler's turn as an elderly Scaly is a new milestone in his career. Granted, I only watched half the film until my roommate walked in on me and started asking questions like, why are you watching this? Aren't you like 30? And do you have to turn the TV to full volume when Adam Sandler sings? So I turned it off and never finished it. But that first 50 minutes truly changed me. Thank you, Sandman. All your characters are literally me. But there is another. David Fincher, the man who loves to torture his actors because, hey, it's pretty funny, released his latest film, The Killer, straight to Netflix this year. While it did have a small theatrical run beforehand, most likely to qualify it for awards, it went to streaming pretty quickly. But before we get into the film, I want to take a second to talk about Netflix. Fincher seems to be a big fan of Netflix. I mean, they've given him some pretty massive budgets to make his movies, so I don't blame him for being a fan. But when a movie gets a streaming-only deal, it risks becoming less of a film and more of a piece of content. Something to be mindlessly consumed while cooking dinner or making love to a real doll with built-in AI. At any rate, streaming takes the films or shows out of the public consciousness pretty quickly. Everyone watches the movies on the same weekend, there's a bit of buzz about it, and then one weekend later, you hear nothing about it. I even fear that I'm making this video a bit too late. Maybe this movie isn't relevant anymore. Unlike streaming, when going to see a movie is more of an event, you have to make time for it. This causes people to see it over the course of a few weeks or months, which keeps the word of mouth going. Now, I just want to say I like streaming. I watch movies on streaming platforms all the time, and I'm subbed to most of the big ones and a few of the small ones. I just think that these films should have longer theatrical releases, and they should get physical releases as well, because what will we do when these services decide to pull their own content that we can't find elsewhere? Netflix, when are we finally going to get a Blu-ray of The Other Side of the Wind? Are you sick and tired of owning nothing and being happy? Do you like the sweet feeling of plastic and metal in your hands? Are you a fucking degenerate? Well, Massacre Video is here for you. They sell some of the most screwed up films you can ever own. From the Unit 731 movie, Men Behind the Sun, to the documentary about fantastical creatures known as incels called TFW No GF. If horror, gore, and exploitation are in your wheelhouse, then you need to check them out. They even sell Hack-A-Lantern, you know, the movie that was on Best of the Worst. Owning this film, watching it with your friends over a beer, just think, you could simulate what it's like to be Rich Evans. Maybe even just assume his identity.
Massacre Video brings this distinctly sleazy hashtag Harvey Weinstein 80s classic to Blu-ray in a brand new restoration from its original 35mm camera negative and featuring revealing interviews with its producer and stars. All right.
What are they going to reveal? Information about Harvey Weinstein?
Massacre Video has been a longtime friend of the channel, and I'm glad to finally be doing a sponsorship with them. They've got a lot of cool titles, and I'm happy to say that they'll be adding a lot of new movies to their collection next year. Use code Kino when checking out to get a 10% discount on the movies. Using this code helps me out, it helps out Massacre, and it helps out film preservation. Take it from me. Lewis, the guy who runs it, goes to great lengths to restore these cult films, and film preservation is a major passion of his. Anyways, back to the video. But I have a feeling that Fincher knew that this was a problem with straight-to-streaming movies. He had to have known that many of them are easily forgotten. I mean, hey, who remembers Mank? So he went fully in on making this a movie that could be memed.
Living amongst the normies.
Well, we call you normies. Okay, bye.
One of the last lines of the film is the protagonist saying to the audience, "Maybe you're just like me."
Maybe you're just like me.
After I heard that line, I could hear the call of the content cage in which I'm imprisoned. The voices in my head started telling me that Neil Mohan and David Fincher were conspiring to get me to make a new Literally Me video because I hadn't released one in months, and they were hungry for it. Ravished. The Killer is a movie with a pretty simple plot. An unnamed assassin, played by Michael Fassbender, fumbles a job in Paris, shooting a dominatrix instead of his target. He escapes Paris, but he quickly notices that law enforcement is the least of his worries. Other people are following him. He arrives at his home and hideout in the Dominican Republic to find his house broken into and his girlfriend in bad condition. This leads him down a path of revenge against his boss, the other hitmen who came to his house, and his client. The movie's broken up into chapters, with each chapter serving as its own mini-narrative. It sort of feels like a TV show compressed into 2 hours, or like a video game. The Killer might be the best adaptation of the Hitman games ever put onto screen. It's just missing some of Agent 47's most classic outfits. I think the reason it's structured like this is that this film is an adaptation of a series of comics of the same name. Yes, it's a comic book movie, just like Blue is the Warmest Color and A History of Violence. Though, Fincher took some artistic liberties with the source material. For one, the movie is set in the 2020s while the graphic novels take place sometime in the 20th century. Also, the graphic novels involve way more politics, especially Latin American politics, while the film has a much more personal revenge story. The comics are set over a period of several years, and everything in the movie takes place over like a week or so. And among many other changes, Fincher changed a lot about the main character. He's still the killer, but the graphic novels flesh him out with a backstory. We see flashbacks of previous hits, of his life, how he got into the hitman business, and more. Fincher only alludes to the killer's past in brief lines of narration, so in the film, we only know him as we see him there, in the moment. Any exposition about his past is sparse and only in the film to help us to understand why he's doing what he's doing. If we don't absolutely need to know about something from his past, he doesn't tell us or show us. In this way, and in many other ways, the Killer feels inspired by Melville's classic film, Le Samourai. In that movie, we get no backstory on the hero Jeff Costello. All we know is that he's a hitman who lives by the Bushido. The film opens up with Jeff in his Parisian apartment, and then Melville follows him as he performs a hit, focusing on all the preparation. A good scene that showcases Melville's attention to detail in this movie is one of the earliest. Costello opens a car that isn't his, and proceeds to try every key in a large keyring until he finds a key that works. All the while, he stares forward, stoically, so as not to attract any undue attention. Similar to the Killer, something goes wrong. He performs the hit, but he gets identified by the police. He manages to squirm his way out of their grasp, but his handlers now see him as a liability and want to off him. The rest of the film is a cat and mouse chase between him, the mafia, and the cops. And Costello is, let's just say, not too happy with the mafia's decision. The whole time, Melville never loses that sense of the importance of the little details. Whether it's showing Jeff get his license plates changed, creating various alibis, or checking his apartment for bugs. The other film that came to mind when watching The Killer was Ghost Dog: The Way of the Samurai. It's another hitman film, this time directed by Jim Jarmusch and starring Forrest Whitaker as a mafia hitman in New Jersey who lives by the Bushido. He also performs a hit for the mafia, but this hit angers the other members of the family, so they want him dead. And so, he fights back in retaliation. Not to spoil anything, but even the endings of Ghost Dog and Le Samurai are extremely similar. One thing that stuck out to me about how Ghost Dog related to The Killer, though, is how Ghost Dog plays the same CD before he carries out a hit. However, he's not listening to the Smiths. He's listening to RZA. Which brings me to the playlist of Fincher's new movie. Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor scored the movie, but The Killer's work playlist serves as the musical backbone of the film, and it's made up completely of songs by the Smiths. Let's get into this, because I think it's pretty funny. I'm not going to complain about the use of Smith songs in the film. I'm a big fan of their music, but it's funny what songs Fincher decided to use. When you see his playlist at the beginning of the movie, if you know the songs, then you could probably predict the whole movie from that one shot. The film opens on the song Will I Wonder, and then, during his sniper mission that goes wrong, the song How Soon Is Now plays. The lyrics that are highlighted say, "I go about things the wrong way. I am human and I need to be loved." The song plays right before he makes a human error and messes everything up. As he flies back to the Dominican Republic, before he finds his girlfriend assaulted, he listens to the song Hand in Glove. Here are some lyrics from that song. "If they dare touch a hair on your head, I'll fight to the last breath." When he flies to New Orleans, the song Big Mouth Strikes Again plays, a song in which Morrissey sings about wanting to kill somebody out of anger, and states that he has no right to take his place with the human race. Not long after, the killer listens to the song Girlfriend in a Coma, which is pretty self-evidently on the nose. I could make a whole video paralleling the Smiths songs to the plot of the movie, but I won't bore you. I would just say, if you're interested, rewatch the movie and then replicate his playlist and listen to it. It'll become very apparent how closely the lyrics match up to the story. Let's go back to the killer's relation to Le Samurai and Ghost Dog. All of these films follow characters who live by a code. Costello and Ghost Dog live by the Bushido, and exist as ancient warriors living in the modern world. Furthermore, they're even bigger enigma since neither of them are Japanese, but they still do what they can to embody the spirit of the old Japanese warriors. They're stoic, cool, and honorable. They're how I imagine weebs see themselves. Sorry anime fans, but you'll never be as cool as Delon or Whitaker. In The Killer, the protagonist's code is not one of honor nor of tradition. It's a code he made up himself. A code that is anything but honorable. It's a rule of living that guarantees efficiency above all else. Anticipate, don't improvise. Trust no one. Never yield an advantage. Fight only the battle you're paid to fight. Forbid empathy. Empathy is weakness. Weakness is vulnerability. Each and every step of the way, ask yourself, what's in it for me? This is what it takes. What you must commit yourself to if you want to succeed. Simple. The interesting thing is, this code, which prioritizes selfishness above all things and diminishes his humanity, works.
I'll be batting 1,000, except I won't take credit for watching some mob bookkeeper drop dead of a coronary.
What does that say about the state of the world? Honor, humanity, etc. get you nowhere in this corporatist world in which we live. Only results matter. Dehumanize yourself. Make yourself a cog in the machine, and you'll get rewarded. Don't ask questions. Try your best not to care about why you're doing anything. Just think of the paycheck. Who cares if you off someone? There are billions of people in the world. Nothing you do will ever make a dent in the world's population. Nothing you do will ever matter. It's blackpilling and inhuman. Fassbender has to repeat this mantra to himself before every hit because I think he doesn't entirely believe it. He wants to think that he's one of the few, not one of the many, and this mantra helps him get into that headspace. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, as Aleister Crowley famously said. Note to the viewer, the killer forgot that it was Crowley who said this.
To quote, someone.
He can't suppress his own humanity. Try as he may. He justifies his killings with statistics. People are born every second and people die every second. How can he, as one man, change these metrics? He's nothing in the grand scope of things, and so why should he feel for any of his victims? During the movie, we hear him repeat these lines, but we also see how he breaks his own rules. For one, he's not paid to fight most of the fights in the film. He's forced to improvise on a number of occasions, and he shows empathy to Dolores. Never mind Dolores, isn't the whole movie based on his empathy? Nothing bad happened to him, but his girlfriend received some pretty brutal trauma, so he's on a warpath out of empathy for her. He wants to keep her safe. I want to also say that it might not be empathy that's propelling him through this story, but control, or rather, loss of control. But after the failed job caused his girlfriend to get assaulted, he realizes that he's lost whatever control he had over his life, and he does what he thinks is best to restore order out of the chaos. The dissonance between his narration and the action on screen adds quite a bit of depth to his character, showcasing him as a man of many contradictions. Without the narration, we wouldn't experience the rise of his humanity. We also wouldn't get this absolutely amazing moment.
Hey.
I've seen people talk online about how the killer is a bozo or an idiot. I don't think he is, but he isn't a genius. He tells us so himself.
I'm no genius.
What he values above intelligence is conscientiousness. He admires a serial killer who's notoriously an idiot, but got away with a string of murders because he was conscientious. He has a system in place that prioritizes following that system and creating redundancies over deep thought. It's like he's a consultant turned assassin. I mean, he knows how many McDonald's are in France, and he has a whole system around getting the biggest bang for his buck at the burger shop. I think that he likes McDonald's because it's a constant for him. Most countries have them, and if he can eat at them whenever he's on a mission, well, that's one less variable for him to worry about. So when shit hits the fan, it's no wonder that he starts to act more like a fool. He's thrust out of his comfort zone, and he might try to still follow his systematic approach, but it's not going to always work, and thus he's bound to make some bad decisions. such as killing the taxicab driver who drove the assassins to his house. The killer even openly questions his own dogma. In Florida, he asks himself,
How's I don't give a fuck going?
so he's at least aware that he's breaking away from his rule set. I think that's why he has to constantly repeat it to himself. Fincher uses his targets to flesh out the world and the killer's character. Hodges, the lawyer who manages all the contracts, is a lawyer who is a respectable public-facing persona, but who also manages a cabal of international hitmen. He's arrogant and not afraid of the killer, thinking that because he has the money and the power, he's safe.
Who do you think you're trying to intimidate? You're not gonna. There's no upside.
He's also greedy. Think about how, after Fassbender messed up the Paris assassination, he charged Claiborne a hefty six-figure sum to ensure that nothing could be traced back to him. He sent the two assassins to the killer's house, supposedly to kill Fassbender, but then asked Fassbender why on earth he would go back to his house after the job was botched.
You went home. How could you have, realizing my hands would...
He was counting on Fassbender not being there. He just wanted him to disappear and stop working for him. But he also wanted to make a profit off his firing. That termination was a bit more costly than he could have predicted. Hodges was the man who convinced the killer to quit law and become a hitman. He's Frankenstein, and Fassbender is the monster. Hodges might think that he still has all the control, but the killer is the one with the nail gun. The Brood, the Floridian assassin who assaulted the killer's girlfriend, lives a life of a different kind of excess. He indulges in vices like gambling and drugs. He's basically a rich idiot. A useful idiot at that. At least for the high-paying clients who want him to kill people.
Maybe a mandatory 30-day waiting period for creatine's not a bad idea.
On the other hand, Tilda Swinton's character, the expert, kills people for a living so that she can live as an Epicurean, using her blood money to buy fancy dinners, expensive alcohol, and Haagen-Dazs ice cream. Her excesses are a bit more of the upper-class variety. She jettisons any kind of good OPSEC so that she can indulge these pleasures. She risks her neck by living amongst the normies because she likes the restaurants in her city.
What are you doing? Living amongst the normies?
When the killer confronts the expert at the restaurant, he simulates a few dates I've been on. Not talking, not eating, not drinking. Just staring awkwardly at her the whole time while she tells a story about a hunter getting sodomized by a bear. I've been there. Before we move on to this last target, let's examine this weird little parable she regales to the killer. A hunter repeatedly goes in the woods to kill a bear, fails, and subsequently gets sodomized by said bear every time, leading the bear to ask the hunter if his intention is actually to kill him. I know she's paralleling their line of work to this story, but it still feels a bit weird. One interpretation I have is that it's about their hopes of pursuing a new life. They pull off a hit, hoping they can get enough money to quit, but then that money dissipates and they have to go back into the woods. They do this enough and then they realize that they crave the hunt and the ensuing results. They're trapped in this vicious cycle. They might continue to lie to themselves, but they know the truth. However, as I said, this is just one interpretation. Maybe it's a meta statement, and Fincher is describing his process of filmmaking. He set out to make a film, an ideal version of the film in his head, and, like almost every film, he missed a mark a bit and got it up the butt. And my guess is that the sodomizing bear in this case was the interfering Hollywood studios. He thought he could master the Hollywood system, but he couldn't, and he had to pay the price.
I was feeling my oats. Having been sodomized ritualistically for 2.5 years. I didn't like the script, but I love Alien. So yeah, I signed up naive and went off to Pinewood to be sodomized ritualistically for 2 years.
Finally, there's Claiborne. I'm not sure if he's a venture capitalist or a hedge fund guy. I mean, there was a shot in the film where an article states that he gave a talk at some VC conference, so I'm assuming that he's the head of some large VC. But that doesn't matter. His money bought him arrogance and stupidity. He bought himself a supposedly secure penthouse, but he can't help announcing himself to the whole world with a stupid license plate. He wields enormous power, or at least he thinks he does, as he tells his men to move heaven and earth for him.
Applicable tax burden offset, and I simply expect to see heaven and earth moving.
But at the same time, he wears a Sub Pop shirt, as if he's desperately trying to be the cool Gen Xer at Starbucks, not knowing that trying so hard is actually lame and cringe. He descends into the world of murders for hires because I guess maybe he wants to take out one of his rivals or influence the stock market, but he's completely unaware of how the world operates. He thinks he can just wire money and the job will be done. When faced with any kind of blowback, he caves. He's a small man who thinks he's more powerful than he is. In that way, he's not too different from the killer. Maybe that's why the killer spares him. He sees in him a kindred spirit, a regular guy LARPing as an Ubermensch. Maybe the killer just came to his senses and realized that killing him would just mean a complete shitstorm. Perhaps the killer came to the conclusion that Claiborne was one of the few, and that he was one of the many, and he couldn't bring himself to kill someone who he wanted to be. Maybe, just maybe, he saw this guy groveling, begging, and pleading for his life. A man who pretends to be a big man, and realized how pathetic this finance guy actually was. It wouldn't be satisfying to kill him. I mean, Claiborne didn't even know who he was. Everything he did to the killer was completely impersonal. Okay, I just want to point out one thing that I noticed while editing the video. Back in New Orleans, Hodges says that what happened to the killer after the mess-up was automatic. In Chicago, Claiborne states that he was given a choice to get insurance or not. I'm more inclined to believe Claiborne, and it shows how Hodges was trying to not only get more money out of Claiborne, but he was also attempting to manipulate the killer and make it seem like it was all out of his hands. Okay, back to it. That being said, Fincher leaves the motivations for sparing Claiborne's life ambiguous, which I appreciate. He lets us into the killer's head for a majority of the film, so we just have to use what we know of him already to come to our own conclusions as to why he chose that option. The film ends on a happy note. He reunites with his beloved and states that maybe we're just like him, one of the many, negating his outlook that he's espoused for much of the movie. I've heard a lot of talk about how this film is Fincher being self-reflective, critiquing his own intense conscientiousness and some might say OCD in filmmaking, and how he acts like that out of a desire for perfection. But as we know with films like Mank or Benjamin Button, he sometimes misses the mark, despite his efforts. And in a way, The Killer is Fincher embracing the corporate soulless conventions of modern streamable movies. It opens up with a flashy, yet cliched montage, and the film is filled with product placement and corporate references. He works in your everyday abandoned WeWork facility, he eats at McDonald's, rents cars from Hertz, makes a note about a guy playing Wordle,
Good luck with the Wordle.
drives Jeeps, and more. It's so prevalent that it feels like parody or satire.
I'll say that's the ugliest little red dog I've ever seen.
What I mean is, she's acting strange.
Hell, he even uses Postmates to gain access to Claiborne's apartment. He can't carry out his hits without the help of Silicon Valley businesses. This man works within a completely consumerist system, and Fincher knows it. Is Fincher selling out? Or is he using this abundance of product placement to subvert said product placement and comment on not just how dependent we are on large corporations, but also how, no matter where you go, it's all the same because of these international businesses? I just think about how many McDonald's sausages he made Michael Fassbender eat on screen. Imagine if he did like 80 takes of that shot. That would be actual torture. But I also think that The Killer is Fincher just having a bit of fun. There's a good bit of dark humor in here, but there's also just some outright goofiness, such as the fact that all of the killer's aliases are characters from sitcoms. Felix Unger, Archie Bunker, Cunningham, Oscar Madison, Lou Grant, Sam Malone, and George Jefferson. You just know that Fincher was giggling when he made this movie. I also think that this film works in a complementary way to Fight Club. One is about an unnamed man rebelling against a soulless corporate system, and the other is kind of about the same thing. The killer has different motivations though. He rationally embraces the soulless system out of a desire to survive and thrive, but his irrationality leads him to revolt. Still, in that rebellion, he continues to act as if he's part of the establishment, using his trusty guidebook to defy the powers that be, while depending on many other powerful entities, like Amazon Hertz and the like, to assist him. He also fails to exact any kind of real change, opting out of killing the super rich guy so that he can live his life in peace. There are no big explosions in a pixie's needle drop, just a quiet exit. As he said at the beginning, nothing he does will affect much of anything. People die every second, and people are born every second. One death caused by him doesn't change those metrics. He might as well be on the side of the oppressors, rather than the oppressed. But as we know, he realizes that he, too, is just one of the many. The web of power that exists is too large and too strong to destroy or even dent. Why try? Just live like a NEET with a hot Latina GF who will make you tendies while you watch reruns of old sitcoms. But, doing nothing can be exhausting.
It's amazing how physically exhausting it can be to do nothing.
So maybe we'll see him back in action soon enough. It's almost more of a depressing ending than Fight Club, as that film ends with a more youthful attack on power, however disastrous it might be for the main character. while the killer ends with a kind of submission. What do you think? Did you like the movie? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comments down below. I've been the Kino Corner, and I will see you all in the next video.
Popeye the Sailor probably said it best.
Maybe you're just like me.